Hello, everybody. How you doing? And welcome to our program this afternoon. This is a very special edition of an ongoing program that we've been doing now since the beginning of April called VC Connect. And we've been having, these weekly showcases in which we, present to you selections from our very, very large filmography of work. So we're very, very happy that you can join us today for this special presentation. My name is Abraham Ferrer, and I'm a staff member at Visual Communications, the nation's premier Asian Pacific American Media Arts Center. We are celebrating our 50th anniversary year this year. We were incorporated in April of 1971, and we're going to be going on through April of next year doing a series of 50th anniversary programs. So we invite you to come check those out. Additionally, we have a lot of really exciting programs and filmmaker initiatives that we're involved in throughout the year. And if you want to check out some of the things that we do, and if you want to check out other opportunities to get involved with our organization, we invite you to get on our mail list. You can find us at vcmedia.org, and then just go ahead and click on the link to get on the mail list. Today's program is really, really special because it's composed of works that were created through Visual Communications' Digital Histories Workshop Initiative, which was founded in 2004 by a partnership between Visual Communications and the Little Tokyo Service Center. Since then, Visual Communications and LTSC have been able to work with dozens and dozens and dozens of folks to tell stories about their communities, and we're really happy and very honored that they've been able to bless us with their stories, while at the same time demystify technology, enabling them to tell their own stories. At this time, I want to thank the following organizations and sponsors for their ongoing support of digital histories, and that includes AARP, the Aratani Foundation, CARO, Union Bank, Sony Pictures Entertainment, the Sundance Institute, and West One Music Group. Funding for VC Connect has been provided by the California Humanities and the National Endowment for the Humanities as part of the Coronavirus Aid, Relief, and Economic Security, or CARES Act, Economic Stabilization Plan of 2020. So we thank all of them for supporting this program and whatnot. So with that said, I think that traditionally what we're going to do is that we're going to go ahead and talk a little bit about the program that that has been up at VC Connect since this past Friday. It's called Which Way Little Tokyo? And it'll be up indefinitely. And I think it's a very, very important program and part of a series of programs that we're going to be doing throughout the month of October as we head into Election Day on November 3rd. People may know, Little Tokyo is a community that is over 135 years old. And it is a community that, for a wide variety of different purposes, is considered an endangered community. We've experienced waves of community redevelopment and displacement of residents and stakeholders, and whatnot. And currently, we're going through that kind of a situation again, with current operations to install a metro station in the heart of Little Tokyo, and a wide variety of people, expressing concern for what this community is going to look like when that project is done. In order to start this program out, I'm going to play for you a short 3.5-minute excerpt from a film that Visual Communications produced in 1976 called Something's Rotten in Little Tokyo. It's basically like a piece that was created by the visual communications staff. There were no directors attached because back then, the organization pretty much ran as a filmmakers, collective, and basically it kind of like talks about some of the things that it was driving Little Tokyo redevelopment in the mid 1970s. But I think that this little clip will hopefully illustrate some of the things that we're going to be talking about, and talk about how some of the things that are happening today are things that we have been dealing with for a very, very, very long time. So Ryan, if you can go ahead and show that clip, and then afterwards we'll have our guest on.
Los Angeles City Council approved a redevelopment plan for Little Tokyo. A study done a year earlier by the Community Redevelopment Agency, or CRA, had shown that 75% of the buildings in Little Tokyo were earthquake hazards and did not meet other health and safety codes. The CRA's stated goals for the redevelopment project included 1,000 units of housing for residents, a community center for the cultural and service groups, and a locally developed shopping mall for the small businesses whose survival depends upon staying in the Little Tokyo community. Today, after many years of frustration and anger over broken promises, cutbacks in federal spending, and a growing awareness of the true nature of urban renewal, redevelopment remains as the single most controversial issue in the Little Tokyo community, and an issue which affects the broader Japanese American community of Southern California. Redevelopment, however, is not new to Little Tokyo. The once thriving community of the 1920s and 30s was totally dispersed during the forced wartime relocation of all Japanese Americans from the West Coast. The area now occupied by the LAPD's Parker Center was once the site of the Olympic Hotel and numerous small businesses. In the 1950s, Parker Center and other civic center expansion destroyed about 1/4 of Little Tokyo's main commercial and residential area along the north side of First Street. The 1960s saw the construction of this building by the Kojima Corporation. It too replaced local hotels and businesses. The redevelopment situation today is focused on the Weller Street Triangle. It is currently home for residents of the Matsushima Hotel, 9 small businesses including Magic Radio, Tokyo Gardens, Naniwa Zushi, Shirayuki, the Cow Bars, and the Sun Building, which houses 22 cultural and community groups, including the Japanese American Citizens League, the Little Tokyo People's Rights Organization, the Pioneer Center, the Go Club, and other cultural and arts groups. People on the Triangle are being evicted for the new Otani Hotel, a 400-room luxury hotel which will cater to the international traveler, businessman, and tourist. 3 residential hotels, the Kawafuku restaurant, and other small businesses have already been torn down by the CRA and the land conveyed to the East-West Development Corporation, owners of the new Otani Hotel. Of the people and businesses that were removed from the Triangle, only Rafu Shoten and Marikyo were able to relocate back into Little Tokyo. The Kawafuku restaurant reopened in Gardena, but the others were simply driven out of the area or out of business. It is this process, then, which tears down buildings and disperses local people out of their historic community that angers the people of Little Tokyo. How this process works, who benefits from it, and who is actually hurt by it are the questions we asked in developing this videotape.
All right. Let me see. Are we back on now?
We sure are.
Okay. All right. Well, I just wanted to let folks know, that this piece was done in 1976, and I had to apologize for the poor quality of the picture. Visual communications productions back in the 1970s were used not as industry calling cards or what have you, but they were used primarily as activist tools. Back then, visual communications was known as the media arm of the Asian American movement. And so, this particular piece was used very heavily as an organizing tool. But in doing so, we never protected the masters and stuff. And so, the master tapes, got ruined and what have you. And currently we're in the process of rebuilding this program so that we can go ahead and reissue it. However, I do hope that the points around the piece, still came through. On that note, what I want to go ahead and do right now is I want to go ahead and introduce, the folks who are joining us in conversation today. And if we can go ahead and bring aboard, I'm going to go ahead and can introduce them for you as they come on. First and foremost, we have a couple of filmmakers from the Digital Histories program. First to come up is Steve Nagano. Steve, is one of the older. I don't want to use that word carelessly, but he's basically a digital histories veteran. He first started producing works with his piece More Than 1,000 Pictures back in 2010. Also with us from the Digital Histories class is Robert Shoji, whose piece Gone has played in numerous venues already, and is part of the Which Way Little Tokyo program that's currently on right now. We also have with us a couple of people who have been involved with a lot of the community organizing in Little Tokyo for the very, very longest time. First off is Miya Iwataki, who was a member of the National Coalition for Redress and Reparations. Well, that's what it was called back then. It's now Nikkei for Civil Rights and Redress, as well as currently Nikkei Progressives. But at one time, she was a staff member of a very important organization called Jack's AI. And we have some footage that we're going to show that we'll talk about in just a couple minutes. Patty Nagano, who's in the picture with Steve, has also been involved with Little Tokyo, as well as many of the activities of NCRR and Nikkei Progressives as well. And finally, we have Bill Watanabe, who was the founding director of the Little Tokyo Service Center and who is now one of the heads of a newer organization called the Little Tokyo Community Impact Fund. And we're going to be talking about that a little bit later and stuff. First off, I want to welcome all five of you here. We have a lot of stuff to talk about, a lot of things to unpack, this afternoon. So what I think I want to do is I want to go ahead and start off by talking to the filmmakers, Steve and Robert. The program, Which Way Little Tokyo, is composed of works, that really speak to the idea that Little Tokyo is home. But Little Tokyo is a community that, if we're not respectful of its history and of its heritage, can be one that's going to disappear, right before we know it. So maybe what I should do is I should start off by asking you, about your individual pieces that are part of the Which Way Little Tokyo program. Home is Little Tokyo as well as Gone. And what motivated the both of you to to create those two works? Steve, let's go ahead and start off with you.
Well, we both moved here about 10, almost 10 years ago to Little Tokyo. And although we had been coming to Little Tokyo and participating in visual communications, NCRR, other organizations, it created a whole different feeling living here. And to me, I think over the years, I try to convey through the films that I want to make or have made is the specialness of Little Tokyo. Not just the place, but the people also. And that's just my sort of my own evolution in terms of what it has become to mean to me. And so this film, Home is Little Tokyo, is about the mural on First and Central. And it basically shows through the mural a large, it's like a Japanese American history lesson by the images created by Tony Osumi and two other artists. So that's sort of like almost becoming thematic as far as the types of films that I want to make to endear Little Tokyo to the people that view it.
Great. Robert, let's turn to you for a hot second. You basically have a rather cyclical relationship with Little Tokyo in the sense that you have a familiarity with the place growing up as a kid, and then you had a little pause where you went ahead and did some other things and then came back to Little Tokyo in recent years and what have you. I have a feeling that that kind of journey for you informs in a way the trajectory of your piece Gone. So maybe what we should do is like hear your story and how that's reflected in your piece.
Yeah, sure. So I guess we go back to the pre-pandemic days. I was coming down to Little Tokyo on a regular basis. In fact, I was coming down every Saturday for like the last several years. Mainly because I was visiting visual communications and I was participating in the digital histories program, which was great. But while I'm here on a Saturday in Little Tokyo, I thought why not walk around the neighborhood and see what's going on, because it actually had been a while since I had been in the neighborhood. So walking through the neighborhood, for me it was really fantastic to see the community in its very vibrant state. A lot of restaurants. Things that reminded me of when I used to come down here for Getsudo, and the restaurants and the shops, and the mochi ice cream and the great coffee shops to go to. So that was all great, and so I really began to love coming down here. Look forward to coming down here on my Saturdays. But during my same visits, walking around Little Tokyo, it was hard not to notice the massive construction going on in the area. You mentioned the regional connector, that huge project going on right in the heart of Little Tokyo, the demolition of Parker Center. And for me, honestly, at that time, I really didn't know what was going on. I was thinking like, okay, they're going to knock down Parker Center, but what's going to go up? And how is that going to affect kind of the Little Tokyo that I know and the fabric of the community? And then the other thing I noticed was the large construction projects going on related to housing. And then wondering how that is also going to change kind of the flavor of the community that I knew growing up. So then I thought, well, I'm in this program to make films. Why not try and document what I'm experiencing, both the good and then maybe the not so good things that are happening in the community. So that's when I decided to kind of document the history that we all know, the past history we all know, the kind of the good, bad, and the ugly. Kind of the current state of Little Tokyo as we see it today, and then this idea that this could all go away. And that actually kind of came from having a conversation with Steve Nagano, and Steve Nagano mentioned, like maybe someday we come down here and all we see is a plaque, sitting where Little Tokyo used to be. And so I kind of added that as an element to the film at the very end. How are we going to feel if we come down here someday and the community is gone? And so what I'm hoping is with the film, after people watch the film, is that maybe it asks the question, as a community, are we going to stand by until Little Tokyo is gone? Or are we going to stand up and fight for the future of the community? Yeah, and then having said that, I mean, we have people on the panel right here, Bill, Patty, Steve, and Miya, and they are literally the ones that are standing up and fighting, as we speak for the future direction of the community. So, for me, it's an honor to be on this panel, and I've met them through various projects. So it's an honor to be on this panel with them.
Great. You know, it's very intriguing to see that you know, both of you are filmmakers who've been participating in digital histories for a while now, and every year when you complete works and show them, invariably, you know, the first exhibition venue is the annual Los Angeles Asia Pacific Film Festival, which is, you know, happening now, and what have you. I'm just kind of curious, what kind of feedback do you and your fellow digital histories cohorts, you know, get like from people who you know, come to a venue such as LA Asian Pacific, you know, looking to see like essentially like the new hotness that's, you know, going to, you know, be making it like either you know, on a big theater screen or Netflix or Hulu or some kind of streaming service near you, and you know, being engaged or confronted or you know, met with works, you know, that are coming from a very distinctly grassroots you know, kind of a thing, you know, where your fellow classmates, you know, basically like are wizards at things like iMovie, but it probably never you know, touched an application like, you know, Avid Media Composer, or you know, or have made, you know, like anything that was like close to 4K digital, or you know, or what have you, but which at the same time, you know, are very, very content driven and very community driven. I kind of wonder, you know, what kind of feedback have you guys gotten over the years to your works, in particular to these two works?
Take it, Rob.
Okay, for me, there's been, you know, various films that I've done over the years, and what I was kind of blown away about for various topics is after I would, you know, show the film, or we would show the film, and you know, people that I've never met would come up to me and say they had no idea about this topic, you know, whatever that film happened to be about. The one was about internment camps. Literally, I had a couple come up to me that seemed to be, you know, well educated, and they came up to me and they said they had no idea. So those kind of things, those kind of interactions that I have with people after we show the films are, for me, are very special. So,
Yeah.
Steve?
Yeah, and Steve?
I mean, besides these films, of course, we've done other films, usually along the same line as far as the topics. And then, of course, we've shown them. And of course, at the BC Film Festival, that's really nice because it's on the big screen. But we've also shown them in San Fernando, South Bay at the JCL and the Pioneer Projects. And so the audience, I think, like you say, what is the audience's reaction? I think in some ways, because the films are about people like them, and some of their own experience similar to either the place, Little Tokyo, remembrances of it, or people that are in our film spotlighted, I think it really somewhat validates their kind of experience, their life, you know, because they get to see sort of themselves on the big screen.
Mhm.
I've had a couple of people that I made the films about come up to me and said, "Oh, thank you very much. You've made me famous." And, you know, in some ways, of course, that's very flattering, but that's their stories are so compelling, you know, when you hear, you know, a Mexican filmmaker that's worked 30 some years for a Japanese newspaper, or in some other cases, somebody's gone to camp, or in another film that Rob did, like having some jazz greats. I mean, not just good jazz, the greats, you know, Charlie Parker, Miles Davis, play on First Street in Little Tokyo. It's like, OMG, you know, how does that happen?
Yeah.
So I think, you know, the films we shoot and do are like subjects that nobody will cover.
Mhm.
Not because they're not big, dramatic, or some of them can be experiences, but they're like sort of ordinary people that somewhat have something extraordinary about either what they do or their experiences. And I think there's a lot of people out there in our community like that. And I think they appreciate the fact that, you know, people like themselves, you
Yeah.
know,
Mhm.
visibility, recognition.
Yeah, great. Well, Steve, you alluded to the fact that the films in digital histories foregrounds people, because people are the folks who make community and the folks that we celebrate and what have you. I want to go ahead and pivot to footage that Visual Communications shot a long, long time ago, and this I believe is 1971. It is silent footage, because the audio track actually has been misplaced. But this is black and white silent footage that, if I'm not mistaken, was shot by one of our visual communication staff members, Robert Nakamura. And if we go ahead and start with the the clip, this is an event called the Downtown Community Health Day, and this was an initiative that was started, by an organization called the Japanese American Community Services Asian Involvement Initiative. And, and I think that I want to call in the person who I believe was the organizer of that event, and that is Miya Iwataki, who's here. Hey, Miya, how you doing?
Hey.
All right. So anyway, as we start off, rolling that clip, it's going to be coming on in any second now. But if you could, Mia, if you can just go ahead and explain to us, very quickly what JAX AI was, and how an initiative such as Community Health Day started, and why it was really, really important, like for the the Little Tokyo community.
Well, thanks, Abe. The JAX Asian Involvement Office was pretty much the movement, Asian American movement center in Los Angeles and actually in California. And these were the days that there were no federal funds. There's Mo Nishida and Karen Chimori.
Mm-hmm.
There was no federal funding, no grant programs. It was like the Wild West. If something needed to happen, we met, we made a plan, and then we just did it. And at that time in Little Tokyo, one of the key issues we were worried about were the Issei. They were neglected. The health and well-being was really a concern. And it was a community of largely single Asian, single Issei men, and they were not getting their proper health care.
Mm-hmm.
These were before the days where we knew we had to have cultural and linguistically appropriate health care. So at that time, there was only one Japanese-speaking social worker in Little Tokyo, and that was Reverend Sayama. He did a survey, and he found that 85% of his patients were either uninsured or on Medi-Cal. And a lot of the Japanese doctors at that time had capped, their offices against, they couldn't take any more Medi-Cal patients. So we had people that were not getting health care. So,
Mm-hmm.
we were organized around it. There was a huge meeting. The Roth Shimpo covered it. And there was kind of like a confrontation. The compromise was that the doctors said, if there's a need, prove it. And that's how we began to organize the community, what we call the Community Information Service Day.
Mm-hmm.
And like the Little Tokyo in the pandemic today, it took a village. And we had this huge Information and Health Services Day. 1,500 people came out. As you can see, most of them were Issei. We had like diabetes and cancer and heart association vans. We had the Sun Building, all the organizations, all the 22 organizations in the Sun Building gave their offices over for health screenings. I got a dental screening there, optometry, social work counseling, legal counseling. There was, everybody in Little Tokyo participated, as you can see through this footage. And even though it's silent, Abe, it's so important that VC got this footage because no one would know about this today. So after the Community Health Day, the doctors were convinced. They saw that there was a need with these 1,500 people who came out, and it was a forerunner to the Community Health Days and community health fairs that we still have today. In fact, Little Tokyo Service Center still has an annual health fair. So it's like a continuum from that time. But the one thing I wanted to tie this back into was the fact that this took place, the hub was in Little Tokyo. The organizing came from the Jack's Asian Involvement Office, who lived in the Sun Building on Weller Street, which is what Redevelopment tore down and which was a forerunner to the Little Tokyo anti-eviction task forces and LT Pro and other struggles that we in Little Tokyo continue to face today to save our community and our legacy.
Sure, sure. I wanted to take a pause for a second while we're looking at this footage and just basically like take note of the fact that all of this, as we basically see here, you know, the mysterious sound recordist. I wanted to make note of the fact that, you know, that all of this footage was actually shot on Weller Street. Everybody knows this today as like this really antiseptic, you know, courtyard called Weller Court. But once upon a time, it actually used to be a street with all these businesses that were, you know, lined up across and stuff. And one of the reasons why I intentionally included this footage was to draw parallels to things that are happening on the other corner of Little Tokyo. This is Weller Street, but you know, there is First Street North, which is only like one corner away. And, you know, there is currently a new wave of community redevelopment. You know, today I think that the current terminology for this is gentrification, but, you know, let's not fool ourselves. You know, displacement is displacement, no matter, you know, how you dress it up. But I take note of this, and I take a note of this vitality, you know, because a lot of other initiatives, you know, were, you know, do happen that involve, you know, community, you know, things. You know, we've had like cherry blossom festivals. We've had Bill for many years. I know that, you know, that LTSC has closed off parts of Little Tokyo to organize a fundraiser of its own that involved, you know, basically like a tofu festival, if I'm not mistaken. And then, you know, through a newer generation of you know, Little Tokyo stakeholders for the past couple of years, they've been bringing, you know, people into Little Tokyo to celebrate Halloween. You know, like a month-long kind of a thing that's called Haunted Little Tokyo. So I'm looking at this footage, and you know, again, obviously it's, you know, 1971 is really a bygone era, but I can't help but think that, you know, there are, you know, parallels to what, you know, is going on in Little Tokyo today and how, you know, things are, you know, are rolling along, as it were. Patty, let's go ahead and bring you in a little bit because you've been living here in the Little Tokyo area, you know, for a while, in the years since you retired from teaching, you know, but you've been involved with a lot of, you know, community-based endeavors, you know, for many, many years, as we had mentioned before at the top. In taking a look at this footage, if I can, you know, get some of your impressions, you know, in terms of how much of a parallel, you know, do scenes like this have to what you're seeing in Little Tokyo today, whether or not, you know, there's like vitality there, or are we foreshadowing change, you know, as it were. If you can talk a little bit, you know, about that, if you could.
Well, comparing the two, definitely there's a lot of change going on now, post-COVID. Before COVID happened, Little Tokyo was being revitalized, and you could see people all over the place and shopping, buying, and eating a lot. And now it's really sad to see the community really hurting. The businesses are very much in need of people coming to the area and supporting them. We've started a program at Tenamachi even to have our residents purchase meals from different restaurants. We know that younger people, when I say young people, the people like Kristen and James and Nancy, they started doing some um, community feeding community through Little Tokyo Community Council,
Mhm.
and that was very nice seeing them support the community that way.
Uh-huh.
And I think the heart of all this is the heart of Little Tokyo, that people care about it and want to see it survive. And there's a lot of people who have things that they can contribute, especially like the activity Sparkle
Uh-huh.
brings in a lot of people with a lot of compassion for Little Tokyo. So
Mhm.
we've seen the community clean up. However, we need it now, and we can't do it. A lot of
Yeah.
people I know would be here if we started one up again.
Mhm.
But you know, it just it breaks my heart to see Little Tokyo this way. Like I say, we're residents, and we walk around the community. We see how needy they are. Yes, they've started this what's it called? The the dining on the street is
Alfresco.
alfresco dining is happening, but they need more people to come, and it just kind of, like I say, breaks my heart to see that they're still needing
Yeah.
people.
Mhm. Before we move on, I wanted to, address an observation that one of the folks in our chat room, had made, and to the point of what we're seeing here, that when we were experiencing the first wave of Little Tokyo redevelopment and displacement in the 1970s, um, we look at this footage, and I think that it's impossible, to look at this and not be drawing parallels to other communities that, for a wide variety of reasons, are also experiencing displacement and redevelopment. Places like Los Angeles Chinatown, or Boyle Heights, or Leimert Park in the Crenshaw, district, or Anaheim Street in the middle of Cambodia Town in Long Beach, or even taking it outside of Los Angeles, San Francisco Chinatown, or or New York Chinatown, where there had been a lot of things going on during the 1970s, and whatnot. And I know that some of the folks who had been here for a while, Bill, Miya, in particular, I'm sure that you're taking a look at this footage and comparing notes from other movements that have been happening across the nation. And it's very striking, to see, this, happening vis-a-vis the changes that Patty was talking about, and not draw some parallels to other places that are also being affected adversely in ways that that Little Tokyo is right now. You guys want to comment on that at all?
Bill, do you want to start?
Well, I I remember. I don't go back as far as Miya does because she got busy in the community at a much younger age. But if you look at this video of the health fair, a lot of those people lived in Little Tokyo. They're older, low-income people, and those were the only people who lived in Little Tokyo back then. It was a very low-income community, and some folks came from other places, of course, because we had like over 1,000 people come out to that. But today, Little Tokyo, if you're not making a high six-figure salary, you can't afford to live in Little Tokyo. And so that's a huge change that took place over the years. And so this whole issue of what's called gentrification has been going on for some time and has been a long-term threat. A lot of the small businesses that were run by families have left, or people have retired, and many young people today have no ambitions to run a small business. And so those kind of changes have also gradually been taking place. So this
Mm-hmm.
this footage is really of a bygone era of what Little Tokyo used to be.
Mm-hmm. Well, Bill, let's go ahead and pivot for a second. And Ryan, I think that we've seen enough of this footage. We can probably go on to the next portion. But Bill, I wanted to pivot to what has been happening with your work with the Little Tokyo Service Center. From when you helped form it back in 1978. But more to the point, I wanted to talk a little bit about some of the activities that you are doing right now, through initiatives such as the Little Tokyo Historical Society, but more to the point with a new initiative that you and I think a couple of people that are on this panel have been involved on, and that is the Little Tokyo Community Investment Fund, which is, basically, an initiative to, to reimagine what is important, to us, and ways of using those strategies to ensure that Little Tokyo just doesn't become hipster alley with a name or a plaque on it, the way that Robert had characterized what it could become, if we don't take care of that. So if you can go ahead and lead us through and talk a little bit about some of the things that you're doing now.
Well, if I may, I'll go back to when I graduated from UCLA in social work. My major was community organizing, and I really was imbued with this idea that we need to organize the community, we need to make positive change, bringing people together to work for the common good.
Mm-hmm.
LTSC kind of helped provide a platform to be able to do more community organizing. And the board of LTSC gave me a lot of free rein to get out there, even though it may not raise money for the organization or whatever. The board said, well, we need to be doing this if no one else is doing it.
Mm-hmm.
So I think a lot of the focus of LTSC has been on community development, preservation, that kind of thing. So we got into affordable housing, and LTSC has done a number of affordable housing projects. And while I was at LTSC, one of my community organizing and enticing people like the Naganos to join the Little Tokyo Historical Society. And so the Historical Society is focused on Little Tokyo and how do we preserve the culture and the neighborhood so that it doesn't go away. We also I started working on the Budokan project way back in 1994, partly because a gym is a good idea by itself. Bringing young people to do sports, team sports, martial arts, gives them discipline and focus in their lives, that kind of thing. So a gym by itself is already a good idea. But to do it in Little Tokyo, it was like, it'll bring young families, young people back to Little Tokyo who otherwise may never come, except maybe once a year to eat noodles or go to the JCCC or something. But otherwise, it's not their place. But we did a focus group. Young people said, if there was a gym in Little Tokyo, we'd be there all the time, every week. And so then Little Tokyo becomes a part of their lives, becomes a part of their sense that this is their place. So the investment fund was kind of another step of how do we try to preserve Little Tokyo. And again, this started in the Nagano's living room after they had been living in Little Tokyo for a while. How do they try to fight off gentrification?
Mm-hmm.
And people talk about gentrification like, oh, it's a terrible thing. Small businesses are being pushed out, big money's coming in. But it's a little bit like talking about the weather. You can complain all you want, but there's not much you can do about it. But in the Nagano's living room, we thought, well, there must be something we could do. And so it was only about 8 of us. And so we decided, you know, there is a mantra that says, if you don't own the land, you can't control it. And it's so simple. And yet, when we thought about that, we thought maybe that's what we need to try. If we can have an investment fund that can buy property and that can kind of direct its funds to help the small businesses, especially the heritage or legacy small businesses, then we can do something to fight off gentrification. And so that's kind of how the Little Tokyo Community Impact Fund got started. We thought, you know, if we could form an investment fund that has a dual purpose. Number one, to make some money for the investors, maybe not the highest rate of return, but something. And number two, the second purpose would be to provide a community benefit, which in this case was to help the heritage small businesses. And so that's what we did. And this, what you're looking at now is kind of the theory that if we can raise enough money, we're talking maybe if we can raise a couple $1 million, we can purchase property number one, and then get rental income. We'll have dividends, and then possibly refinance and go purchase property number two, number three, number four, and in that way become a real community-based real estate investment fund, which, as far as I know, is somewhat unique in the investment fund world. That's what we're trying to do. And, you know, this reminds me of the story of the guy who says he's building a car, and somebody said, well, how much of the car do you have? And he goes, well, I have 4 hubcaps. Well, it's a start. It's not really there for a car. And so we're working on our first 2 million. How much do you have? Well, it's a start. But actually, we're doing pretty well. And we've raised just over $600,000. And these are all people who have a heart for Little Tokyo, people who want to put their money, get some return, but put their money in a fund that's going to do good and that's going to help the community. So anyway, that's the LTCIF project. We just got started only a couple of years ago, and I hope people will be interested enough to give it a look.
Great. You know, I wanted to go ahead and you know, bring up a card while we're talking, and this is a depiction of some folks who were involved or are involved with the Little Tokyo Service Center, and one of you know, their fundraising activities. I believe it's called the Sake Festival, which basically supplanted the Tofu Festival. And what have you. I don't know what it is. It's like, you know, Little Tokyo Service Center has this thing about foodie events and what have you. It's like you kind of like hit on something. But I wanted to go ahead and freeze on this image for a couple minutes, you know, to ask you and to actually like turn it out to some of the other folks, Miya, Steve, you know, Patty, you know, to ask you, in what ways, you know, does the Community Investment Fund you know, complement the initiatives of an organization such as the Little Tokyo Service Center to obtain and repurpose you know, buildings that, you know, are slated for demolition or that nobody wants, and repurpose them into you know, things that or institutions that would be useful for this community, whether or not that they be low income housing, low income transitional housing, you know, workforce training, you know, what have you. Because I'm kind of like looking at this kind of like in the bigger, you know, picture, you know, and what have you. What kind of things, you know, can acquisition of land, you know, do for us? And getting back to the whole thing here is, you know, again, you know, how does it benefit people? You know, of Little Tokyo, such as the people that you see in this picture here. This is kind of like a free-for-all kind of a thing, so anybody can jump in. But you know, it's a question I'm curious about.
Well, I think the whole issue of like uh, maintaining or developing a Little Tokyo in the ways that we want it is there's not one way. There's like, uh, you know, one struggle, many fronts, you know,
Hmm.
the LTSC with the social services and the housing, especially low income housing, is one part of it. And the community council, Little Tokyo Community Council, that tries to organize all the various churches and NPOs in the area, as well as residents in the area, you know, to seek out, especially like maybe things with the um, regional connector or the planning of Parker Center and how that's going to open up to Little Tokyo, we hope, and all those kind of things. So it's like one struggle, many fronts, I think. And I think we just are one player within, you know, this whole, hopefully it's not like necessarily organized in that sense, but I think we all are pushing toward that goal of being able to have Little Tokyo the way we want it to be.
Hmm.
And
And I think that, you know, a lot of us think of Little Tokyo as home. When I was looking at the footage, you know, before this session, I remembered how being at Jack's AI in Little Tokyo shaped my life. And after working all those years, you know, for the congressman or at the county, when I retired, the first thing I did was to come back to Little Tokyo and join some organizations. And then I was lucky enough to be a part of the Impact Fund. But Little Tokyo is home for us in a lot of different ways. I mean, it was the start of the community pre-war. Post-war was a place we could come back to. During the Asian movement days, you saw the organizing and the health fairs and the different programs that we built. And during the redress struggle, you know, Little Tokyo was home to the redress struggle. And today, it's a home for a lot of the activism. And I think that, you know, when I look at what LTSC has done in terms of creating the Far East Lounge as a place where people could meet, you know, cultural programs, bringing in younger people. I think that what we are going to be able to do with the Impact Fund is, you know, not only to help preserve and save legacy businesses, you know, as we get more and more people investing in our fund, but that we can also, you know, purchase properties that instead of being turned into another, you know, shoe store or Starbucks, you know, could also have space for cultural programs that would bring in young people like Budokan will be doing.
Hmm.
And so to have a fund that has a social responsibility mission, I think is really important for bringing people back to Little Tokyo and for, you know, creating a home for, you know, many more people in the community, for younger people. I know my niece is really getting into it, and it's just real exciting to see that happening and see the type of work that Kristen Fukushima and, you know, folks are doing.
Yeah, sure.
I think
Go ahead.
I say something
Go ahead,
just
Ty.
real quick, that the reason that this got started too, the Impact Fund, was we saw that a business needed our help way back, and then we weren't formed, and we could have helped the business continue to be on First Second Street, and had to move to another smaller corner. So that was unfortunate, and so we saw the need to have this Impact Fund to support other businesses.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. You know, I wanted to throw this out to you guys before we threw it out for a couple of questions from our audience. And I want to invite, you know, audience members, if they have any questions of our panelists or any recollections or any reminiscences about Little Tokyo, that please share them you know, in our chat. And time permitting, we'll, you know, be able to answer those. But I wanted to ask you guys, or actually make that observation, you know, that you know, the initiatives like the Impact Fund and and other things seem to be going hand in hand with a generational shift that is happening not only in Little Tokyo, but a lot of Asian American communities. Talking about Little Tokyo specifically, we're seeing a rise of a new generation of business owners, people like James Che, who runs Cafe Dulce, people like Philip Hirose with Aze, a couple of blocks down from our offices here in Little Tokyo, and other newer boutique businesses that are being nurtured through the initiatives of people like Mariko Lockridge at LTSC. We're seeing newer organizations like Nikkei Progressives, initiatives for bringing people back into Little Tokyo, like the Tuesday Night Project and and what have you. That and from the outgrowth of initiatives such as the Little Tokyo Community Council and the 1998 Ties That Bind Conference, we see newer initiatives such as the Sustainable Little Tokyo Task Force and the organization Kizuna, among many others. I'm kind of wondering, to what extent will it take a melding of all of us, whether or not, we're like, the old vets here as well as the young bloods that are coming up, to be able to, to form like a new 21st century coalition of Little Tokyo stakeholders, that will really take care of this neighborhood and in fact push it forward, further into the 21st century. I kind of want to see if I get some of your thoughts on that.
What do you think, Bill?
Well, I don't think there's a single approach, Abe, that would do it. I mentioned the Budokan, and to me, the Budokan project is a community preservation project, as I mentioned. I think we have to work at it with a number of different things working together, because the economic forces behind gentrification is so powerful that one effort is probably not strong enough, unless, if I were a multi-billionaire, okay, maybe one person could do something, but we're not. Most of us and everybody in the investment fund, I should say, no one in the investment fund is a fabulously rich person. Most of us are just community folks. We have some retirement money, and we're willing to invest some of that into this fund to try to make it work. And so it's going to take a lot of efforts to try to preserve the community. I always talk about Little Italy here in LA, and the fact that it's almost totally gone. And most people don't even know there ever was a Little Italy in LA. And so it takes a very multifaceted approach, I think. And I just noticed a chat from Erica G in San Francisco Chinatown, and they're dealing with the same thing. And so trying to keep historic ethnic neighborhoods alive is really pulling together a lot of people willing to take steps towards that.
I think along that vein with the investment fund, this was a while back when we were forming, and we had a couple of people who worked in nonprofits, and they said, I think we can do it. That means $10,000 investment. And I think that really encouraged us. And the other thing that was encouraging for me, when Bill said, hey, think about it, 1,000 people, $10,000, that's $10 million. And I thought, well, in Southern California, I think we can get 1,000 people to invest $10,000. They're not donating, they're investing it. And I think we still need to do a lot of outreach to, a large area and a lot of people to get them to invest in Little Tokyo.
And none of us were experts in investments and real estate. And so I remember just thinking, as we're thinking this through, I had CDs and I was getting 0.1% interest. And I thought, gosh, if this investment fund can pay 1%, 2%, 3%, that's like 10, 20 times more than what I was getting anyway. And so the more we talked about it, the more, normal, everyday people like us, uh, the Naganos are retired teachers. I'm a retired social worker. We thought, if we can do it, there must be a ton of other folks who could do it too. They just have to have the heart.
Mm-hmm. Sure.
And there are two categories too, because we know that now, especially with the pandemic now, that $10,000, might be tough for some younger people or people that are still that are working in nonprofits. So there's a $1,000 and a $2,000 level for to enable people at different income ranges to be able to participate, and then hoping that once they participate, they could talk to their parents or other relatives that are kind of settled in now. So it's there's room for everybody. Everybody's welcome. And I think the other exciting thing about the impact fund is, like you mentioned, there are so many gentrification struggles happening in other places, and these are potential areas of unity because people in the impact fund have been in contact with the efforts that are taking place in Leimert Park or Boyle Heights or
Great.
China, and stuff happening in San Francisco. And I think it's really exciting because it's like Steve was saying, or someone was saying, one struggle, many fronts, and this this is an issue that affects a lot of most communities of color.
Uh-huh. Yeah. I want to go ahead and share with you a question that turned up in our chat box from Albert Albin. Hi, Albert. How you doing? And thanks for tuning in. He asks, has there been any effort to outreach to the new non-Asian residents of Little Tokyo? Developing allies would increase the numbers. And I think that this also speaks to things that are also an inevitability here in Little Tokyo, as with Los Angeles and with all migrant and minority communities. We're talking about like migration, and it's something that's not exclusive to Little Tokyo. So much so that I take a look at Little Tokyo now as kind of like the crossing point, between all sorts of communities here and what have you. Here you have, Korean American seniors here. You have, people who live and work in the adjacent arts district. You have non-Japanese, Americans, Asian Americans, who are stakeholders and, here now. And I do, bring up the sample of, of James Che as an example, Cafe Dulce and, what have you. I think that that's a good question, to even put out there. Like, what what efforts are initiatives such as the Community Investment Fund, engaging in or thinking in terms of building allyship, given that Little Tokyo is a community that is constantly in flux.
That's a good question. Um, the fund is mostly volunteers, and in fact, we just officially have our board of directors. They started meeting in June of this year, so we are really quite new, and we have a marketing committee that has started working on developing plans to try to do more outreach and marketing in the broader community. But up until now, we've been using our own email lists, our own contacts. We've had a number of community outreach meetings to let people know about the fund. And admittedly, we've been reaching out to people who are our friends or knowledgeable about Little Tokyo. We don't have to try to convince them to do this. But I think, as Albert suggests, we need to try to reach out to more folks. Not all of the investors are from or about Little Tokyo. They are people who just agree that this is a good thing, and so they have become investors. But mostly there are people that we know, and we need to do more of an outreach to get out there.
I think one of the things that attracts other people or people beyond Little Tokyo or who are Little Tokyo activists is the compelling argument that, you know, before the war, there were 43 Little Tokyos, Japantowns, or Nihonmachis throughout the United States. And today, there are 3 left. And it's not like we're saying Little Tokyo is exclusive to Japanese Americans, but Little Tokyo is one of our last standing Little Tokyos, and it's such a it's so important to have that as a part of, you know, our legacy, and to have a place that we know we can go to get, you know, like really good sekihan, or, you know, whatever we like to eat. You know? So it all comes back to food, right? But, you know, a place that we could just feel comfortable and safe in.
I see.
I think all of us have talked, you know, or worked with other people and other communities, if you want to call them communities. But as far as a ethnic community or enclave, I can't think of, you know, Bill mentioned about Little Italy, which is like, where is it? And, you know, what kind of community exists there? Or you talk about Boyle Heights or those things, but the sense of community in Little Tokyo, I don't think exists in very many places. And I think that is something that, at least it's an evolving thing for me. It's the treasure, the importance of it, and, you know, the value that it provides, not only for the people that live here, the people that associate, but, you know, all of Southern California. And like Miya points out, not just California, but, you know, there's 3 left. And I don't know, in some ways we owe it to the future and we owe it to the past, you know, with the Issei and Nisei built up, and then we owe it to the future as far as like having some sort of thing that they can relate to in somewhat a similar way which we did, you know, sort of like where we could call it like our home spot, you know.
Sure. This next question is actually going to be a free-for-all question, so I'd like to also bring Robert Shoji into the mix. Actually, no, that question, let me see, actually that question disappeared, so I think that you know, that'll perfectly be fine. but the question was one, you know, that on its face looked like, you know, a question that may not necessarily have been you know, germane to this particular discussion, but it was one in which, you know, the viewer asked, you know, what challenges are there being, you know, Asian American in this country? I'm going to go ahead and, you know, basically turn that around and, you know, put it out to all of you. What is it? What are the challenges for being a stakeholder or a visitor or an artist whose work is inspired, you know, through your engagements or your relationship with a community such as Little Tokyo? Maybe what I could do is, you know, I can kind of like turn that question around, you know, that way, and you know, and find out from each of you, what is it that you value from Little Tokyo, and how does that reflect, you know, what you do here, how you live, how you work, how you make art, you know, how you engage with people. So, you know, maybe we can, Robert, why don't you go ahead and get us started, and we'll just see, you know, how we go with this.
Yeah, so this theme of Little Tokyo being home, you know, really rings true for me personally. I mean, my literal home is in Torrance, but my second home, and the place, literally the only community that I feel like home in all of LA, is Little Tokyo. And, you know, from my visiting Little Tokyo in the last few years, and there was a gap where I didn't spend any time in Little Tokyo, but when I would walk around by Visual Communications, I would look at the building that my grandmother used to live in, a couple of buildings down from VC, And then it brought back all of these childhood memories of my mother and I coming down to Little Tokyo and visiting my grandmother, walking around the community. It really, brought back all of those memories of Little Tokyo being home. So what I worry about, and I think it's been touched on a bit, is I think everybody in this group, we have, memories and ties to the core Little Tokyo community, but moving forward, how do we reach out and grab other people, and specifically maybe younger generations, to have those same feelings and ties towards Little Tokyo, and then moving forward that they would have that same feel that we have, that we want to maintain, that feel of the community moving forward. I know, like the Budokan and other younger generations that are doing fantastic things in the community, but I just hope that we can figure out a way to make those ties that we have to Little Tokyo, to communicate that to the next generation.
Sure.
Yeah.
Anybody else? Sure. Patty?
I would say.
Yeah, go ahead, Bill.
I would say, giving a little bit of a history lesson. If you were eating a salad 100 years ago, chances are that was grown by a Japanese farmer. Or if you were eating fish back in 1910, there's a good chance that fish was caught by either Chinese or Japanese fishermen. And so Little Tokyo and places like that, Japantowns, Chinatowns, they've been here for a long time. Little Tokyo, Abe, you mentioned, is 135 years old. And many people throughout the country, not so much maybe in California, but they think of fresh off the boat. And that the Asians, you didn't come on the Mayflower, so, it's like you're all newcomers. What have you done for our society? And places like Little Tokyo is a reminder that says, no, we've been here. And we are a part of building, like in this case, Los Angeles and Southern California. And it's a physical evidence that we are part of this society, and we've helped to build up this community over 130 years. And so preserving that is important because, as I mentioned, Little Italy, we don't want it to be forgotten. And we need to remember our pioneers and the sacrifices they went through going to incarceration camps during the war and working hard to work for their families. So preservation is not just for the sake of preservation, it's really to make a statement.
Mm-hmm. Patty, let's go to you because I thought that you had something to say about that.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that over the years, I've done things with different organizations here, and they have brought children to the community, and the kids would all say, oh, I love it here, I'm going to come back. Or even the older ones, maybe they're 12, 14, they would say, oh, when I get older, I'm going to come back to Little Tokyo. And I said, promise? So here are these young kids saying that. And so they're having that experience, like what Bill's saying, or Miya's, that Robert's saying, that we want to preserve that so these kids will come back and want to come back. But if it continues to disappear, then yeah, it'll be sad that we won't have it for them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Like you're saying, that special place in our hearts.
Sure. Well, I think that it's important to note all of that and to realize that through you guys' efforts and we did pack this particular panel with the knowledge that all of you are coming from different places, but because all of you are also involved with the Community Impact Fund, that you are all coalescing around a common goal. To preserve this community and whatnot. So I think that what I'm going to go ahead and do is, just kind of leave it there for the moment because we're kind of running out of time. But what I want to do is I just want to basically let folks know that if you're interested in some of the issues that are that have been brought up in this program, I do want to recommend first and foremost of all that you do visit the Vimeo showcase at VC Connect called Which Way Little Tokyo to see Steve and Robert's pieces and such. There are a handful of non-digital histories pieces I did want to call your attention to. One of them is a piece that was a visual communications production that was pulled together by our co-founders, Dwayne Kubo and Eddie Wong, the same two criminals who put together Something's Rotten in Little Tokyo. This piece is a short piece called 1970s, The Fight for Little Tokyo. And basically it's the story of the Little Tokyo People's Rights Organization specifically, and I really do suggest that you check that out. Another piece that's in the program that was actually funded by a special NEA, or National Endowment for the Arts initiative, called the Expansion Arts Program, was a piece that was done in 1986 called No Vacancy. And this was a piece that was directed by a former Rafu Shimpo staff reporter named Naomi Hirohara, who basically examined the fallout from the demolition of the Allen Hotel on 2nd Street, the block where, the Ava apartments are now currently located. And she takes a very unflinching look at what happened, to residents, that were displaced out of that residential hotel. And I think that's very important piece, to take a look at, and it's a very important complement to, to some of the digital histories works that, that are on display. I want to, close off with a rather sobering note that one of the pieces that we highlighted as part of Which Way Little Tokyo is a piece called Little Tokyo Sewing Machine Shop. And basically it was this sewing machine repair store and emporium that was on 1st Street, right across the street from where the Nishi Honganji is located. Last year, that location got raised and is now basically a parking lot. So, the changes that we're talking about and the changes that we're trying to prevent, like from, turning Little Tokyo into like a, cultural, bygone kind of a place. It's happening, and we are doing things or working on things to try and address that, what have you. So, I do encourage you to take a really, really close look at that program. It is going to be up for the entire month and maybe beyond, definitely through November 3rd, Election Day. I want to let you guys know of some of our other allies and some activities that we are having currently. One of our allies and an organization that many of us belong to is the Sustainable Little Tokyo Task Force, that started out as an initiative, or actually is an initiative of the Little Tokyo Community Council. Their address, if you're interested in finding out about what they're up to in terms of giving a very sizable voice to what kinds of development and what kinds of changes happen here to Little Tokyo, and particularly change that should not happen and cannot happen without the community's voice, as a major player in this. Check them out at sustainablelittletokyo.org. We did talk at length, obviously, about the Little Tokyo Community Investment Fund, or actually the Community Impact Fund, sorry, Bill, and whatnot. If you go ahead and take a look at their website, they have, a wide variety of other of activities that are going on, and, what have you. And I'm really taken by, their tagline, preserving the legacy of Japanese Americans in Little Tokyo. I think that speaks to like a certain urgency. I think it speaks to like a very, very today, kind of a thing, can what have you. Check them out at their website. You can find out some of the things that they are doing and whatnot. A little bit closer to home, a little bit closer to visual communications. I did mention that visual communications is in the middle of its 50th anniversary year and stuff. And typically one of the cornerstone activities that we do is this ginormous Los Angeles Asian Pacific Film Festival that we normally do in the spring. obviously because of COVID-19, this year's edition of the film festival has suddenly supplanted Seattle International as possibly America's longest film festival. We basically did the emergency COVID-19 version of it back in May, and as you can see here, the festival is extended for about 6 weeks. Really, this is longer, than Seattle International. So we are really the longest film festival, in the nation right now. But, with nearly 250 individual pieces and new premieres, dropping every Thursday all the way through Halloween, you cannot say that, by checking out the festival that you are going to basically see everything that reflects what is in our heads as Asian Pacific American creatives, and whatnot. And again, I did mention Steve, and I did mention Robert. They have brand new pieces that just dropped as part of this festival, as part of a brand new edition of Digital Histories. Those pieces will be available as part of the festival through the 31st. So I truly recommend that you check out, the brand new Digital Histories selections. They are a tremendous addition, to what visual communications and LTSC, had started, back in 2004. We are doing a whole bunch of different things as part of our 50th anniversary year, and one of them is going to be a gala that's going to be held on December 1st. More information, just check that out, by going to our website and hitting VC50 and whatnot. And then finally, I want to just remind people that this is October, and I'm so terribly sorry to put it in such terms that the culmination of the past 4 years has been like a total shit show, and whatnot. And there are ways that we can do to make sure that we get back on track and what have you. And one of them is to basically just exercise your right as an American citizen and just simply vote. I'm going to go ahead and leave this here and stuff. And Patty, I'm going to go ahead and give you the last word because, as a person who's been involved with Little Tokyo, as a community activist, as an educator, as an organizer, and as a stakeholder, and what have you, I think that you have a very, very unique, perspective, from which to to talk about, the things that are important here in Little Tokyo. So, go ahead and go.
I have a challenge and a call to action for people to do. You'll need to find parking, you'll need to pay, and you'll need to walk. We need you to come to Little Tokyo to support the restaurants, the businesses. So I challenge you that wouldn't it be wonderful if everybody came once a month? If you live somewhere else and you came once a month, even the people like from South Bay or Orange County or Valley, if you came once a month, that everybody would fill up all the days of the week or whatever, and we'd have people coming all the time. So please answer this call to action and come to Little Tokyo.
Excellent.
It's
And invest.
and invest, but it's a special. It really is a special place.
Yeah.
We live here and we love it, but it's been in our hearts forever and will be. I mean.
Excellent.
So please.
And on that note, I think that we're going to go ahead and call it a program. I want to thank all of you for joining us, today. And I want to thank all of our, our guests and audience out there virtually who have joined us, today. Thank you again so very much. And visit Visual Communications' website, visit the festival, check us out, check out what these artists are doing, and check out what really hardworking folks like Bill and Miya and all the others are doing to make sure that Little Tokyo just doesn't become a faded memory. So thank you again, everybody, and enjoy the rest of the day.
Thanks, Abe.
Bye-bye.
All you
Thanks, Abe.
participants out there, thank you for coming.
Yeah.
Thank you.